Our entitled neighbor said part of our backyard was technically hers, then put up a fence right through our garden. When we tried to talk, she smirked and said, "Good luck proving anything." 3 months later, she was crying in court as the judge ordered her to pay $218,000 in damages and legal fees, all because she ignored one letter from the county. I never thought a plastic stake in our garden could declare war. But the day Brenda started claiming our land, our quiet suburban life became a battleground for everything we held dear. Our home, a cozy 2-story brick house in a leafy suburb just outside Charlotte, used to be our sanctuary. It had a big backyard with an old apple orchard and a patch my wife, Sarah, poured her heart into, her vegetable garden. I'm Daniel, by the way, 34 years old. Sarah and I bought this place 7 years ago, scraping together every penny. That garden, though, that was Sarah's pride. She'd spend hours there, kneeling in the dirt, coaxing life out of the soil like it was magic. Tomatoes, basil, squash, you name it. The neighborhood itself was peaceful, mostly older folks who'd lived here forever. People waved, lent tools, brought banana bread. It was idyllic. Until Brenda moved in next door. Brenda was, well, let's just say she wasn't the banana bread type. She bought the house about a year ago, maybe in her early 50s, with this stiff, unmoving hair and sunglasses even on cloudy days. The first time I introduced myself, she barely looked up from her phone, just a tight smile and a distracted MMM. Sarah baked brownies and took them over in a nice tin. Brenda didn't even open the door fully, just snatched them with 2 fingers like they were toxic, and shut it. Sarah stood there, blinking, like she'd just been slapped with a paper towel. Still, we tried. You try to be good neighbors, right? Things were quiet for a few months. Brenda kept to herself. We kept to ourselves. But then, little things started. She'd walk her tiny, yappy dog, in its pink sweater, right along our lawn's edge, sometimes letting it wander in and leave little gifts. Sarah politely asked her once to clean it up. Brenda just said, "Oh, it's probably from a squirrel," and walked off. Then came the hedges. I'd spent a weekend meticulously trimming our hedges, the ones technically on our property, well within our fence line. That Monday, I came home to find them butchered. Seriously, hacked down like someone took a weed whacker to them blindfolded. When I asked Brenda, she shrugged and said they were overhanging, and she was just protecting her space. I pointed out they were on our side. She just smiled. "Oh, lines can be tricky," she said. That phrase stuck with me. Lines can be tricky. The next week, a white plastic stake appeared in our garden. One of those boundary markers, jammed right through Sarah's cherry tomato patch. I assumed it was a mistake. I pulled it up. The next day, another appeared. Then another. Slowly, over weeks, they crept inward. 6 feet of our garden became littered with these plastic markers, poking up like weeds. It felt like some passive-aggressive board game, and we were losing. I confronted her. I shouldn't have gone alone, but I was too angry to think straight. "Hey, Brenda," I tried to keep my voice even. "Do you know anything about the stakes in our yard?" She was watering a fussy ornamental plant on her porch, not even turning around. "I'm just marking what's technically mine, technically yours." I blinked. "Brenda, the property line is clearly marked. It's been the same for decades. We have the original survey." She turned then, slowly, like a villain in a movie. "Surveys can be wrong. Old ones especially. I had a guy come out. Said the line cuts through that weird little slope of yours. It's common in neighborhoods like this. Poor planning." I stared at her. "You can't just claim our garden. That land is ours." She gave that tight, smug smile. "Good luck proving anything." I went inside shaking, not just with anger, but confusion. What was this? Was she bluffing? Sarah was already digging through our house papers, pulling out the survey. The line was clear, straight as an arrow, 8 feet to our side of where Brenda claimed. We thought that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, we came home to the sound of hammering. That's when we saw it. A fence. A brand new, waist-high wooden fence being built right through the middle of our backyard. Not on the edge. Not between properties. Through our backyard. Through the tomato patch. Through the marigolds. Sarah screamed when she saw a worker casually toss her little decorative gnome aside like trash. I marched over, furious, demanding they stop. The guy just shrugged. We were told this was part of her property now. She showed us a new survey. I knocked on Brenda's door so hard I thought it might splinter. She opened it, calm and collected, sipping from a mug that said #BossBabe. When I told her she was trespassing and damaging our property, she just said, "Take it up with the municipal office in Raleigh." I already filed everything. Then she closed the door in my face. That night, Sarah sat on the back steps and cried. She looked at the broken garden beds, the scattered mulch, the tomato cages lying like little metal skeletons. And she cried. I sat next to her, completely powerless. We were just two regular people against someone who seemed to know how to play the system. But something shifted in me. I knew one thing. Sarah and I had done everything by the book when we bought this house. Every signature, every permit, every boundary. And Brenda? Brenda had made one big mistake. She assumed we'd just roll over. She had no idea who she was messing with. And that's when I made the call that changed everything. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the original property documents while Sarah lay curled up on the couch, her face blotchy from crying. I'd never seen her so heartbroken over something like this. This wasn't just a patch of land. It was hers. That garden had gotten her through 2 miscarriages, through job layoffs, through her mother's death. She told me once that planting seeds made her feel like she still had control over something in the world. And Brenda had just ripped it out like it meant nothing. The next morning, I took the day off and drove straight to the municipal office in Raleigh. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe someone to just say, "Oh, no problem, sir. We'll take care of that awful woman." But real life isn't that simple. After an hour in a cramped lobby, I finally spoke with someone from land records. I laid out everything. Our survey, the fence, the garden, Brenda's smug, good luck proving anything. The clerk, a thin guy in his late 30s, adjusted his glasses. Well, her survey was done within the last 6 months. It supersedes the older one on record. Doesn't mean she's right, just that it's the most recent claim. I stared at him. So, she gets to take our land just because she filed first? No, he said quickly. But it means that until someone contests it legally, the county can't intervene. You need your own updated survey and possibly civil court. It's not uncommon in older neighborhoods. Boundaries shift. Fences were installed wrong decades ago. It's messy. That's all he had to say about someone chopping our backyard in half. I drove home with a knot in my stomach. Sarah met me at the door, hopeful. When I told her, she just nodded silently, going back to water the half-destroyed basil that had somehow survived. The fence was done by then. Jagged, rushed, but standing firm like a middle finger planted in the soil. That weekend, I paid out of pocket for a new private survey. The guy came, measured everything. 2 hours later, he handed me a folder. "Your original line's correct," he said. "No question. That fence cuts about 6.5 feet into your property. She's got no claim to it." Finally, confirmation. I asked if he could file it. He said I'd have to do that myself, along with filing a formal dispute or court claim to have the fence removed. That's when it hit me. We were going to have to fight this. Legally, financially, emotionally. And Brenda knew it. The next few weeks were torture. Brenda acted like the fence had always been there. She redecorated our side, planting shrubs, placing a plastic flamingo, even stringing solar lights along the top rail. She actually called the cops one evening when Sarah leaned over to water a tomato plant regrowing under the fence, claiming we were tampering with her property. The officer was polite, but clearly uncomfortable. "Look, you guys need to settle this in court. I'm not a land dispute judge. Just try to avoid each other." Avoid each other? We shared a property line, and now a fence, right through our backyard. You couldn't design a worse tension cooker. Sarah started staying indoors more. She stopped tending the rest of the garden, even the intact parts. "It just reminds me of what she took," she whispered one night, staring at her untouched gloves. It killed me. Every time I looked at that fence, I didn't just see wood. I saw what it was doing to her, to us. One day, I found her kneeling by the fence, just sitting, staring at wilted marigolds. She looked so small, so defeated. That night, after dinner, she asked, "Do you ever wish we'd bought somewhere else?" It was a punch to the gut. We'd built our whole life around this house. And now it felt like a prison. But things weren't done getting worse. A month after the fence went up, I was mowing what was left of our lawn when Brenda approached me from her driveway. Stack of papers in one hand, that stupid mug in the other. "Just wanted to give you a heads up," she said, chipper as ever. "I'm building a gazebo." I turned off the mower, wiping sweat from my face. "A gazebo? Where?" She smiled. "Oh, on my new part of the yard, right where that little slope is. It'll be great for entertaining." I stared at her. "You mean the part you illegally claimed?" She shrugged. "Well, I see it differently. And apparently the county does, too, since no one's stopping me." That night, Sarah and I sat in the living room, staring at survey papers, complaint forms, fence photos. We were up against a wall, literally and legally. A civil suit could take months, years. We didn't have the cash to burn on lawyers. And a gazebo on our property would complicate everything. That's when the idea came to me. I started reading, researching. I stayed up late every night, going through land records, county policies, encroachment cases. I found a legal aid group that helped homeowners with boundary disputes. And I found something Brenda had overlooked, a tiny, boring detail. When she filed her updated survey, she failed to notify the County Planning Commission. Not just that, she also ignored the mandatory 30-day waiting period before beginning construction on any permanent structure involving a boundary change. And the kicker? There was a record of a warning letter sent to her mailbox. One she signed for. One she ignored. That was the moment the tide started to turn, even if Brenda didn't know it yet. But before I could act, the betrayal happened. It wasn't just about the fence anymore. It wasn't just about the garden or a gazebo. It was about someone we trusted, someone who had known us for years, choosing her side. Sarah's sister, Chloe. Chloe was always impressionable. She worked in real estate, flitting from office to office, chasing the next big thing. She'd visited our house dozens of times, watched our dog, helped Sarah plant the very first squash patch. She knew our yard, knew the line. She'd laughed over margaritas on our porch swing last summer. But apparently, Brenda had been chatting with her, offering her coffee when Chloe visited, sharing her side of the story. And now, Chloe had filed an affidavit in support of Brenda's claim. Sarah found out when she was prepping our documentation for the legal aid group. The affidavit was publicly filed as part of Brenda's permit expansion request. Chloe had written that she distinctly remembered the previous owner saying the slope was technically part of both yards, and the fence was always meant to be temporary. A total lie. Sarah stared at the screen for a long time. Then she quietly closed the laptop and walked out. I found her crying in the laundry room 10 minutes later. "She was there," Sarah choked out. "She helped me plant the lavender. She knows." It felt like we'd been stabbed in the back. I called Chloe the next morning. I didn't yell or curse. I just asked why. She hemmed and hawed, then finally admitted Brenda had offered her some freelance staging work if she'd help clarify the boundary issue. "Daniel, it's not personal," she said. "It's just paperwork. Everyone wins. She gets her gazebo. You get peace." I hung up. Before I said something I'd regret. That was the breaking point. That was when I knew. For Sarah, for our home, for everything we had built, I wasn't just going to fight this. I was going to bury Brenda's smug little fence in legal fire, and she had no idea what was coming. Rock bottom didn't come with a bang. It crept in like fog, settling into the corners of our life until we couldn't see past it. After Chloe's betrayal, Sarah barely spoke to her. They'd been so close, talking daily. Now, Sarah's phone would light up with her sister's name, and she'd just flip it over, letting it ring out. Sometimes she'd stare at it for a few seconds longer, like she was waiting for an apology that wasn't coming. And it never did. Brenda, on the other hand, was in full victory parade mode. She hosted barbecues on her new slice of our yard, complete with fairy lights and pop music. Her plastic flamingo collection expanded. She invited guests over, always when Sarah and I were outside, loudly proclaiming how she'd finally cleaned up the neighborhood eyesore. One afternoon, I caught one of her guests using our tomato cage as a footrest. We felt erased in our own home. The final blow came on a Thursday morning. I was dragging the trash cans out when I noticed a small yellow sign near the fence. Laminated. Future site of the Willow View Garden Gazebo. Permitted. With a QR code. She was really doing it. Sarah and I sat on the porch that night and said nothing. We both knew what the other was thinking, but neither of us wanted to say it out loud. Maybe we should move. It felt like giving up, waving a white flag on the lawn we dreamed of growing old on. But after everything, the legal limbo, the sleepless nights, the silent meals, it felt like the only option left that wouldn't break us completely. We weren't just losing land. We were losing each other. And that's what finally broke me. That night, after Sarah went to bed, I sat in the living room staring at the municipal documents I'd printed weeks ago. I ran my fingers along the warning letter Brenda had ignored, the one she'd signed for. The one that clearly outlined that any structure built during the 30-day review period was in violation of Municipal Code Section 12.16.07b. I pulled out a notepad and started writing. For the next few weeks, I became a ghost. Not in a spooky way, just invisible. I stopped reacting to Brenda's provocations. I stopped bringing up the fence. I stopped fighting with Sarah about next steps. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every time Brenda had a contractor on our property, I took photos. Every package she signed for, I cross-referenced it with construction supply receipts. I combed through the online permitting portal every morning before work, noting every status change. I spoke with the Land Records Office again, but this time, not as a frustrated homeowner, but as a guy who had learned the system. I asked real questions, took real notes, learned about conditional use permits, variances, appeal processes. And I filed a formal complaint, not just about the fence, but about how she built it and when. I cited the code violations by number. I attached the signed warning letter. But the thing that really turned things around? An old man named Arthur. Arthur was the previous owner of Brenda's house. I found him on a hunch, using property transfer records. He was in his 70s now, living in a smaller place a few towns over in Durham. I called him, introduced myself, and explained. There was a long pause on the other end before he sighed. That slope's not hers. Never was. I had it surveyed before I sold. Even planted those apple trees to mark the line. He agreed to send me a signed affidavit and a scanned copy of his survey. I thanked him a dozen times. When I told Sarah, I swear I saw the first real smile on her face in weeks. That was the beginning of the rise. But it didn't come easily. One morning, we woke up to find the rest of the garden torn up. Not just trampled, but destroyed. Stakes pulled up, planters cracked, tomato vines yanked from the soil and left in a pile like yard waste. I ran outside, heart pounding. But of course, Brenda wasn't out there, just her dog barking from her deck. I called the police, the non-emergency line. An officer came out, looked around, and said there wasn't much they could do without video evidence. Might have been animals, he muttered, scribbling notes. Sarah walked back inside before he finished speaking. Later that night, she told me, I feel like I'm disappearing in my own house. I didn't know what to say, so I just held her. We were both tired. But tired doesn't mean done. I installed a camera under the eaves, facing the garden. Motion activated, high resolution. No one knew it was there. 2 nights later, it caught Brenda sneaking into our yard with a pair of garden shears. She clipped 2 small rose bushes down to the roots, bushes clearly on our side of the fence. I downloaded the footage, time-stamped everything. I sent it along. With a formal complaint to the Municipal Legal Office, the Planning Department, and RHOA. I didn't tell Brenda. Let her keep smiling. I was also building something else, quietly, carefully. I found a land use attorney through the legal aid group. Young guy named Liam, smart as hell, passionate about property rights. He agreed to help us file an injunction against any new construction pending resolution of the boundary dispute. It was an uphill battle, but we had documentation now, witnesses, surveys, video proof. We even started reconnecting as a couple. I think it was that shared sense of purpose. We went to the municipal office together, dropping off forms, grabbing coffee afterward. We laughed. Not much, but enough. Sarah even started tending the far side of the garden again. She replanted some basil. It wasn't the same, but it was something. She also started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. Set up an easel in the garage. Said it helped her feel like she could still create beauty, even if our yard looked like a war zone. Things weren't perfect. The fence was still there. But for the first time in months, we weren't just reacting. We were acting. Then came the municipal hearing notice. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. The Planning Commission had received our formal complaint and scheduled a hearing to determine if Brenda's permit would be revoked due to multiple procedural violations, failure to honor the 30-day notice, destruction of shared property, and encroachment without proper boundary verification. It was happening. The date was set for 6 weeks out. In that time, Brenda seemed to sense something was shifting. She got quieter, less smug. No more barbecues. The solar lights disappeared one night. She stopped waving at cars and started watching us from behind her curtains. One afternoon, I caught her trying to measure something near the fence line. She noticed me watching and quickly ducked back into her house. 2 days later, a man in a suit showed up on our doorstep. Said he was representing Brenda and wanted to offer an amicable resolution. His proposal: we keep the garden, she keeps the fence. No apology. No damages. Just an agreement to coexist peacefully. Sarah didn't even let me finish reading it. She walked to the shredder and fed the letter through without a word. And honestly, that moment said more than any court order ever could. Because we weren't the same people we'd been 3 months ago. We were stronger now, sharper, united. And Brenda? Brenda was starting to realize the storm she'd invited into her life. It's strange how revenge doesn't feel like fire. It feels like focus. Cold, clear, surgical. I used to think people plotted revenge in a fit of rage, slamming doors and clenching fists. But when I reached that point, past the fire of betrayal and loss, and hit that rare clarity on the other side, I realized it wasn't about payback. It was about taking back control, reclaiming something stolen from us, telling someone who thought she could bulldoze our lives that no, she didn't win. She just woke up the wrong neighbor. The municipal hearing was approaching fast, and with every passing day, Brenda grew quieter, but more erratic. She'd peer through her blinds constantly, sometimes pacing her backyard like she was guarding it. Her dog barked less. Her guests stopped visiting. She'd gotten the notice, too. She knew this was coming, but she didn't know how much I'd prepared. By the time the hearing was set, I had assembled a full arsenal. Not just the old survey and the ignored warning letter, but layers of backup, timestamps, maps, even aerial satellite screenshots showing the fence line before and after her construction. I'd filed formal witness statements from 2 neighbors who'd lived here for over 20 years, confirming the original boundary had never been disputed until Brenda. I had footage of her vandalizing the rose bushes, photos of her using our yard space, Arthur's signed affidavit, and, perhaps most importantly, documentation from the county planner herself. It stated Brenda never completed the final mandatory step in her permit process, submitting the signed acceptance form required after the review period. She built the fence before the county had a chance to finalize it. That one mistake was all it took to make the whole thing crumble. But before the hearing, I wanted to tighten the noose. Liam helped me file a temporary injunction to halt further construction. So that gazebo? It never even broke ground. A county inspector came by, visibly annoyed when he saw the fence. This should have never gone up, he muttered, taking notes and photos. The day after, I got a call from a reporter at a local paper. Someone, probably one of our friendly neighbors, had tipped them off about a property dispute gone haywire. They wanted to do a feature. Sarah wasn't sure. "Do we really want to go public?" she asked, curling up next to me. I thought about it. "No," I said, "but we want her to think we might." So I spoke to the reporter off the record, giving just enough to confirm a hearing was coming and county violations were involved. The next week, a short article appeared, "When Fences Make Enemies, Backyard Dispute Shakes Quiet Neighborhood." No names, but the photo of our street made it clear. Brenda's car didn't move for 3 days after that. Meanwhile, I was moving with purpose. I asked Liam if we could calculate damages, not just legal fees, but property value depreciation, loss of use of land, and destruction of garden assets. He put together a formal breakdown. It came out to $218,000 in projected damages, factoring in the long-term cost of removing the illegal structure and restoring the property. When I saw the number, a strange calm settled over me. Not because of the money, but because I finally saw the shape of the endgame. And just to twist the knife a little more, I submitted that estimate as part of our pre-hearing brief. It would be attached to the official file, a public document. Anyone could read it. The next morning, we found a note in our mailbox. No envelope, just a folded sheet of paper with thick cursive handwriting. There's no need to escalate this further. Let's be neighborly and come to a reasonable compromise. It wasn't signed, but the overpowering lilac scent gave her away. I didn't respond. Instead, I visited the HOA. I'd avoided them up to that point. Our HOA was usually more concerned with mailbox colors than legal boundaries. But it was time they knew what kind of precedent this could set. I sat down with Susan, the president, a no-nonsense woman who'd lived here for 35 years. I walked her through everything quietly, calmly, all the documents laid out. Susan was furious. "Do you know how many complaints we've gotten about her dog alone?" she said, flipping through photos. This is the last straw." She promised to attend the hearing, not just as a neighbor, but as an official HOA representative. More weight, more scrutiny. I also reached out to our local councilman. I didn't expect a personal reply, but his office responded, confirming they'd flagged the issue for review, especially because of the permitting irregularities. That would push the county to take it seriously. The final piece of the setup wasn't legal or political. It was emotional. One evening, a week before the hearing, I printed old photos of our garden. Full bloom, sunlight drenching the tomato patch, Sarah kneeling in the dirt, smiling, her hands covered in soil. I framed it and left it on the living room table. When Sarah saw it, she didn't say anything. She just stood there for a long time, then whispered, "We're getting it back, aren't we?" "We are," I said. Because by that point, I wasn't just doing this to win. I was doing it to rebuild what she'd lost. The morning of the hearing, I woke up early. Sarah made coffee. We sat in silence, sipping slowly. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. I'd never felt more ready for anything in my life. The hearing was in a conference room at the Municipal Center, rows of folding chairs, a panel of 3 planning commission members. Brenda showed up 10 minutes late, wearing all beige, like she wanted to disappear. Her lawyer was with her, a tall, tired-looking man who kept glancing at his watch. Sarah and I sat in the front row. Liam sat beside me, organized and unreadable. When the clerk called our case, the air in the room shifted. As I stepped up to speak, papers in hand, heart pounding, I knew something deep in my bones. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice dressed in the clothes of calm, methodical preparation. And I was ready to deliver it. The hearing started like most bureaucratic things do, slow, stiff, overly polite. But under the fluorescent lighting and dry legal jargon, I could feel the current turning in our favor before I even opened my mouth. The lead commissioner, Mr. Davies, adjusted his glasses and began reading through our submitted packet. He paused at the damage assessment. His eyebrows rose. Then he flipped to the stills from the video footage, Brenda, in high definition, pruning our rose bushes like she was doing us a favor. He lingered there for 20 seconds. Brenda's attorney tried to regain control. He stood, cleared his throat, and began with the usual legalese. My client acted in good faith based on a professional survey. Any errors in procedure were minor and unintentional. She was under the impression the property lines were in dispute and sought to improve what she reasonably believed to be her yard. He went on, playing the confused homeowner card. At one point, he even tossed out miscommunication, as if Brenda hadn't. Personally torn out garden beds and strung up party lights on land that didn't belong to her. But Liam's one rule for this day was, stay calm, stick to the evidence, let her bury herself. And she did. When they gave us the floor, Liam started with a concise, calm walkthrough of every misstep Brenda had made. He referenced exact code violations, presented the signed letter she'd received and ignored, laid out the timeline like a trail of breadcrumbs. With every new exhibit, we saw the commissioners' faces shift from neutral to unsettled, then visibly annoyed. Then he played the video. No one spoke as the footage showed Brenda crossing the fence line at 11:43 p.m., shears in hand, cutting down the roses Sarah had planted our first year. You could hear the quiet snip of the clippers. See the satisfied smirk on her face as she picked up a blossom and tossed it aside. Mr. Davies didn't even try to hide his expression. He leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Carter, is that you in the footage?" Brenda didn't answer at first. Her lawyer nudged her, but she kept her arms crossed, staring straight ahead. Eventually, she mumbled, "Yes." That was all she said. One word. The woman who'd built a fence through our lives was suddenly mute. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. Next came the neighbor testimonies. Mr. Langford, a retired architect 2 doors down, stated firmly that the property line had always followed the apple trees. Then came Susan, the HOA president, who dropped the hammer. "If this kind of behavior is allowed to stand, you'll have copycats throughout the neighborhood. It undermines decades of peaceful coexisting and, frankly, it's embarrassing to the community." After that, Mr. Davies called a brief recess. Brenda didn't look at us. Her lawyer whispered to her, gesturing in frustration. She nodded once, but she looked pale, smaller somehow. When we returned, the commission gave their findings. They were swift and decisive. Brenda had violated county building codes by initiating construction before finalizing her permit. She had ignored a formal warning letter. She had failed to properly notify adjacent property owners of the proposed changes. She had entered and damaged property that was not hers repeatedly. And her own surveyor, when contacted for clarification, admitted he had not cross-checked against official municipal records. The county rescinded her construction permit in full. The fence was ordered to be removed within 30 days. If she failed to comply, the county would remove it at her expense. The commission further referred the case for civil proceedings on the matter of damages. While they couldn't issue a judgment themselves, they formally supported our request for recovery of legal fees and property damage costs totaling $218,000. But the final blow came with the administrative penalty. Because Brenda had ignored a county stop work warning and submitted false boundary claims, she was fined an additional $17,500 in county violations. Non-negotiable. When the decision was read aloud, I glanced at Brenda. She wasn't smirking anymore. Her lips were pressed together so tightly they'd gone white, and her eyes had welled up with tears she refused to let fall. Her lawyer just stared at the floor, defeated. After the hearing, I walked out into the parking lot with Sarah, both of us blinking in the daylight like we hadn't seen it in weeks. We didn't speak at first. It was too much, too big. Then Sarah let out a laugh. A full, raw, relieved laugh that turned into tears halfway through. "They're making her tear it down," she whispered. "The whole fence, every stupid board." I nodded. "And pay for all of it." For the first time in months, the weight on my chest was gone. The fallout was swift. Within a week, we received a letter from Brenda's attorney offering to settle out of court and avoid prolonged litigation. The proposal included a full reimbursement of our legal costs, payment for landscaping repairs, and a gesture of goodwill of $60,000 if we dropped the pursuit of the remaining damages. We declined. By that point, Liam had already filed the civil suit, backed by the county's findings and 3 signed affidavits from our neighbors. We didn't just want money, we wanted it on record, permanent, undisputable. A month later, Brenda's fence was gone. She didn't take it down herself, of course. The county sent a work crew, billed her directly, and left a bare scar in the lawn where her petty little empire had once stood. Her gazebo dreams were over. Sarah planted new rose bushes the same week. Brenda eventually sold the house 6 months later. She didn't say goodbye. No more parties. No more barking dog. No more smugness. The new owners, a young couple with a toddler and a golden retriever, brought over homemade banana bread their first week. They asked if we liked zucchini because they wanted to start a garden and had extra seeds. I looked at the backyard from our porch, saw Sarah out there planting again, kneeling in the dirt, humming softly. It wasn't just land. It never was. It was peace. It was home. And we got it back because Brenda thought we'd roll over. She thought a fence would keep us out, but all she did was build herself a box and hand us the hammer. Justice isn't loud. What would you have done if your home was invaded like that?